If you asked me 25 years ago that we'd still be playing games that had the graphical style of NES games, I probably wouldn't have answered because I was 5 and critical thinking hadn't quite developed yet. But in any event, despite the incredibly shiny, realistic graphics of today's powerhouse consoles and PCs, we are in the middle of what I call the retro revival. Games once again made in the same art style that was the thing back in the 80s and 90s, because it was all we had. So why the resurgence? Nostalgia? Necessity? Perhaps both, maybe neither? How long will this resurgence last? This is how we begin Season 6 of Downloadable Content, so listen in, and let's go! Welcome to Season 6 of Downloadable Content. I am Brian Williams, and with me we have my co-host, Ron Goldie.
Hey, everyone.
And only Ron. So we will start off Downloadable Content Season 6 with just the two of us yakking your ears off.
Hopefully not too much. I mean, I think this is a pretty interesting topic, but one that I was hoping more people would be on for.
Well, it is a weeknight recording. That's the danger of having them.
Yeah.
So, but we have each other.
And the listeners.
And the listeners, yes. On the wide world of the internet out there, so thank you very much for listening in. If this is your first time listening to Downloadable Content, we welcome you. Hope you enjoy what you hear. As I usually mention at the beginning of each new season, this is a podcast made by gamers for gamers. Doesn't matter what skill level you are, whether you're a hardcore gamer or a casual gamer, whether you love first-person shooters or RPGs or puzzle games or mobile games, anywhere in between. This is by us for you, and we always do, we extend the invitation out to anyone who is listening. If you would ever like to come on and record with us, let us know, drop us a line. If you have any episode ideas you want Ron and I or a future panel to discuss, please let us know. And the way you can do that is via our shiny brand new website. Yes, after 6 years, we finally have a website, ladies and gentlemen. That website is www.dlcpodcast.com, and on it you can find every single episode, yes, all 104 of them. This will be 105. Every single episode from all 5 seasons, each episode with its own iTunes link, YouTube link, a link for direct download or streaming. Episodes are also found on Stitcher. But everything related to downloadable content is now on that website. So on there you can find our social media links to get on our Facebook, our Twitter, our Tumblr. And on the website as well, there's a feedback link. You could send us feedback, let us know how we're doing, give us ideas, let us know if you want to be on an episode. It's all there on our shiny new podcast website. Again, www.dlcpodcast.com. You can even go there and see what most of us actually look like.
Yeah, we actually have the faces up now, which is nice.
Yeah, we're no longer just disembodied voices. You can now assign a face to the name.
Just the face, though.
Just the face, and only the face. That's all right. So I think that about covers the introductory spiel, unless you had anything else to add. Otherwise, we'll just...
I think that was everything.
Good. For those of you new, Ron is the co-host. He's been on the most episodes. I think you're about at 80 at this point.
Close. I'm getting up there. I mean, you obviously host almost every single one. I think you've only then when you haven't properly hosted was the Mega Man one.
Yep.
But you were basically just a co-host listening, trying to input on, but.
Yeah, I mean, I've let other people guest host a few times, but I'm hoping to actually do that more this year, because some of you have come up with some very interesting ideas, and what I would like to do is, if you're the one who suggests an idea, congratulations, it's now your episode.
Yeah.
It's like a Gibbs rule.
Mm-hmm.
So. All right, so let us dive into our first episode of 2016. We are going to be talking about the retro revival, as I've called it. Now, we've talked about this in episodes past. I was going through some of the archive during the holiday break, and back in season 1, there was an episode in which we devoted to reboots and reimaginings and reports and re-this and re-that and
HD remakes and all that jazz.
So, while and not sort of picking up that discussion, it's sort of tangentially related. I mean, I first started noticing developers going back to this sort of retro, going back to older franchises. We saw this a lot with Nintendo and the Wii. We got to see things like Donkey Kong Country got resurrected as Donkey Kong Country Returns.
Yeah. There's also the recent release of Super Mario Maker, which has you being able to make levels in either the NES Super Mario 3, I believe it is. No, they have Classic Mario, Super Mario 3, Super Mario World from the SNES.
Yep.
And then you can do the modern day Super Mario. What the hell is it? The Wii U version with the spinning that Mario can do.
Yeah, it's a new Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah, that's what it is. Wii U, yeah. That's. I hope when the next Nintendo console comes out, they drop the funky names and just be like, it's the Nintendo whatever. And it's just like, get rid of the Wii and the Wii U's, because that's really, really annoying.
I know Nintendo always beats to their own drum, but when you have like the numbering system that Sony uses, PS1, 2, 3, easy, simple to follow. We get
it's easy, simple to follow. Eventually, it's going to get to the point where we're talking about like it's Final Fantasy, where we're talking about the PlayStation 32 or whatever. But if we're alive for a PlayStation 32, that's a feat of medical technology in and of itself.
Well, at that point, I think if we got to that high, then we become one with we are actually plugged into the Matrix at that point.
We have ascended the human form. We are no longer human.
Yeah, that's if it gets to that point. But in any event, so we had games like that, which started to make me think that we're going back. We see franchises get rebooted entirely, starting over with a new storyline, like Tomb Raider, for example.
Yeah.
Devil May Cry.
Yes, Devil May Cry they get rebooted, which is surprising. I know the game itself was good, but I think the story itself was not as good.
But then we have games that, I mean, and this is going to be predominantly in the indie realm of things, that are using, what we would consider older types of game styles, like Supergiant use it with Bastion and Transistor, using that sort of isometric 3D that we kind of saw in games like Sonic 3D Blast. That sort of, not quite 3D perspective.
Yeah, the 2.5D roughly.
Yeah, that's what they've called it.
Probably the more recent one would be Undertale with its I would say NES level graphics. It's like in between NES and SNES in terms of how the sprites move, although they use more colors than what you could use on a NES or SNES, but I would say that that's in that similar vein of definitely pixelated graphics, not realistic, leaving it more to the imagination on how the characters would look like.
And the thing, and Undertale has been a runaway success.
Yeah,
which tells me that, 30 years late, 25, 30 years later, there is still heavy interest. It seems to me that, while the big AAA companies have moved on from this sort of graphical style, indie developers are embracing it and evolving it and doing things with that sort of NES, Super Nintendo, maybe Sega Genesis type, sprites and pixels that, that maybe the AAA developers hadn't thought of doing. So it's almost like a breath of fresh air to something that we had thought long dead.
Yeah. I think part of that, the reason why the indie developers and the indie games are so, I don't want to say popular with it, but use that style so readily, is there's probably three reasons behind it. First is cost, because it's just generally speaking going to be easier to develop a game in a 8-bit or 16-bit style than it would be to generate it with like Unreal Engine 4 or to develop your own proprietary engine and then have your game run that way. Second could be an art style reason. Maybe there's an art style or an emotion you want to have conveyed in the game that can't be done with modern graphics, but would work better for an 8-bit or a 16-bit style game. The examples I would give would be like Bastion and Transistor, which definitely use the game's graphics to promote the art style and emotion of the game. The third reason for me is this forces the player and the developer to focus more on mood in terms of song choice, in terms of like using the right like audio tracks. Also in your wording, it helps make your wording a lot crisper, because you generally speaking can't show as much emotion with a sprite as you can with a normal polygon figure. So having proper dialogue and ambient background noise for setting the mood helps really convey that. That was definitely a feeling I had while playing like Bastion, Transistor, and Undertale, was that these are games that use their graphics as an advantage to help convey the story and use the audio to help convey the emotion that they want to convey in that particular point in time.
To further that point, I agree with you, especially since, people, indie studios are people who, the people who make these games in indie studios are like our age, so our generation. We're talking, into your late 20s, into your 30s.
Yeah.
Maybe early 40s. Going back to the games that we grew up on and have the fondest memories of.
Mm-hmm.
So I could certainly understand that, we are used to having our experiences and our moods, through this sort of art style.
Yeah.
And the other points that you mentioned, and I mentioned in the intro, necessity, you specifically cost, which, you are right. It is much cheaper to develop a game in the older, 8 or 16-bit art style than it is using, the resources that, say, Ubisoft or Square or whatever have at their disposal.
Yeah, I mean,
proprietary engines and.
Yeah, I mentioned Unreal Engine 4. I know that those guys specifically have put their I think it's their Unity engine, or one, like generally speaking, I know for them once their gaming engine has generally speaking been pushed to its limit and they start developing work on the next gen one, they put that one out for free or very cheap for developers to use if they wanted to. I think it's the Unity engine that they offer for free.
It is Unity, yes. It's Unity.
Yeah, and they specifically offer it partially for people to learn how to program games and also to animate in a 3D environment. Because they also use it, they do a lot of like game schooling work and game degree work and putting forth, trying to lay down that foundation, which I think is really cool. But this is something that developers can use too and try and save money on, but also the time learned in trying to 3D posing, 3D rigging, 3D animatronics, making sure all the lighting's proper, making sure all the physics work. That's a lot of time that's invested too, when generally speaking, you could just throw most of that out of the way and just focus on the art style of the 8 or 16-bit and making sure that the pixels line up right is, generally speaking, easier than making sure the face rigging on the left eyebrow of your female protagonist isn't gonna shoot off into the atmosphere whenever she raises them.
Yeah, there is that, and most indie studios don't have those sort of resources.
Yeah.
So, and since graphics aren't the be-all and end-all, Square, they can really focus on the writing.
Yeah.
Square, don't worry.
Focus on the audio. Square.
Yeah, it just letting you out there. I still haven't forgiven Square for Final Fantasy 13, nor do I think I ever will. So, I haven't.
I feel like the gaming industry as a whole feels like Square, you fucked up with 13. You kind of redeemed yourself with the MMO for Final Fantasy 14, but don't fuck up 15, otherwise your company may not exist afterwards.
Oh, it's the problem I find with AAA developers and with our, they're not making, indie games. They're focused on the consoles and the PC market, and
they have to answer to investors and the board members, and not just your average Joe Schmo guy on Steam being like, your game's shit. Well, like, okay, well, why is my game shit? Can you explain to me why it's shit? Because if so, maybe I can improve it.
Meanwhile, feedback to an indie developer is super, super critical. Because, okay, Square makes a bad game, they can write it off. An indie developer makes a bad game, that could be the end of the company.
Yeah. The indie game may spend 12 months putting their game out and $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 paying their employees to try and sell their game. And if they only make $5,000, well, that indie company probably just folded up.
So, since the emphasis is not on graphical shininess, you can then focus more on the story and the actual gameplay elements. It is something that has been done with great success. One of my absolute favorite indie games is Shovel Knight.
Oh yeah, Shovel Knight's definitely a game that uses the pixel 8-bit medium. Like I don't think it's 8-bit exactly, because there's way too many colors in Shovel Knight that they could not get on an NES. But they definitely use the 8-bit medium to further gameplay that we thought would not be fun with a platforming style. We thought platforming style games were going to be like your Super Marios or your Sonics or your Mega Mans, where you're going to be running and gunning and shooting or what have you. Whereas with Shovel Knight, you're using quite literally a shovel and ping-ponging across the stage. And there's certain power-ups and weapons you get that alters the gameplay, like the propeller dagger, where you can literally fly across the stage, or
or like the different suits of armor, where one that I've used, it was the only one I used, the one that makes it so that when you die, and you die a lot, you only lose half gold instead of like a big chunk of it.
I think the only suit of armor that I used was the basic one, although the one I considered using was if you fell into a pit, you'd pop out at half health and not just instantly die.
Oh, that's nice.
I forget. That was a really expensive suit, but and the reason why I didn't buy it was because by the time I got to the end game, I had Propeller Dagger and realized, oh, I could just Propeller Dagger across pretty much the entire stage as long as I had the energy for it.
Yeah, so Shovel Knight is basically an NES game in every single facet, right down to the music. The only thing that would make me like Shovel Knight even more is if they actually put out an actual NES cartridge.
I think fans have made NES cartridge. It is possible to do Shovel Knight on an NES controller, right?
Oh, yes.
I was gonna say, I'm pretty sure it's just jump and shovel.
Jump, shovel, and I think it's up in one of the buttons for the energy, for the magic.
Yeah, because it is like up in energy, like up and shovel button, I think, for energy.
I mean, I still have an NES, yes. So I mean, if Yacht Club were to put out an actual NES cartridge, I would just be beside myself. I'd buy it.
I don't think it run on an NES, but sure, it could probably. I mean, that'd still be cool to see.
Yeah, I absolutely. So, you have the games like that. Another one that comes to even, not even confining yourselves to platformers. We'll go with an RPG. Cthulhu Saves the World.
Yeah, well, Cthulhu Saves the World is definitely like satire, tongue in cheek.
Oh yes.
Of like the RPG genre, but it's still at the same time they do a lot of like manipulation of graphics and things like that you didn't think could be done on a SNES, or if you did, thought it was going to be a glitch of some kind.
Yeah, usually glitches were exploited. I mean, we have the technology now where, if you make one of those types of games, you could probably get it run glitch-free with our, with current computers and things like that. It's not a design flaw.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, the same company that did Cthulhu Saves the World, they did Breath of Death 7, which again is another, bit of tongue-in-cheek. But it kind of looks like the early Dragon Quest games and how it's presented.
Yeah. Undertale's an RPG.
Undertale's an RPG, and and to me, it looks like Earthbound.
Yes, it's definitely an Earthbound feel to it. I say RPG, and then I go, wait, and I think about the combat in the game, and I go, oh wait, no, it's not an RPG, it's a bullet hell. And that's definitely an interesting thing of being like, there's the RPG mechanic of being like fight, run, talk, whatever, but then the actual like combat of defending yourself from enemies is not your normal a random number generator running in the background of being like, your character takes X damage or what have you. It's literally a little heart on the screen, and you as the player move it around to avoid the damage. And it seems very simple at first, and then you start like it took me a half hour to realize it was a bullet hell game and not an RPG. And once I realized that, it became a lot harder for me to beat because of the general twitch reflexes you need to avoid the bullets. Is definitely something that's not some people can do right away.
I mean, even now, what people have done, what developers have done with those pixel, the pixel style games, you still have your insanely hard platforming games. Like Super Meat Boy comes to mind.
Binding of Isaac for your exploration, Legend of Zelda, bullet hell feel. FTL, Faster Than Light, for your roguelike exploration.
That's right. I forgot about FTL.
I'm just looking at my Steam library and be like, well, there are indie games are there that have a very decided style.
I'll give you one. It's another insanely hard platformer called They Bleed Pixels.
Yeah, I've seen that before. That's another one that's definitely...
Oh, I haven't been able to beat it yet because as you get further into the game, the twitch reflexes required get insane.
Yeah, there's one called Risk of Rain, which is a roguelike shooter where you control the little pixel dude, and there's a bunch of bad guys on the screen. You gotta shoot them up. And it's generally speaking a random number generator or a roguelike of how the paths break out for like what maps you're gonna play on and things like that. It's very rare for you to have two runs that are the exact same in Risk of Rain, but they're all generally speaking very challenging and very fun. And there's going to be a lot of like replayability in it.
And that's the thing. I mean, even though we have these games, and I also think that, all right, yeah, we've mentioned, graphical style, art preference, we've mentioned necessity. What about nostalgia? Just pure nostalgia.
I mean, there's definitely going to be nostalgia related to these just because of the fact that of the art style, because when you first see the art styles of all these pixel games, your first reaction is going to be playing your NES or your SNES on your living room or back porch or your entertainment center or what have you, wherever you played your consoles. And you're just going to be that nostalgia of being your 5-year-old or your 6-year-old self, just being like, ooh, pretty colors, let's have some fun.
With one major difference, you can actually save on these games.
Oh yeah, you can actually save instead of it being a passcode you have to enter in, and as you make sure you didn't spill your tab on it.
Yeah, just, notebooks of passwords that, had to remember. I think one other game that, it's another RPG that I also think is a love letter to the old style. It's an RPG called Evoland, in which you actually, as you play through the game, the graphics evolve because each sort of gameplay mechanic you find in a treasure chest as an unlockable. It's like, as soon as you start the game, it just looks like, we start off with almost Atari graphics, and it's you and two chests, and you open up the first chest, and it's like, you found color, and suddenly the game gets color. Or you open up the second chest, you've discovered 8-bit graphics, and then you open up another, you've found sound.
Yeah.
And then later on in the game, as you're playing, you find, you found 16-bit graphics, and the game style just changes.
Yeah. And there's definitely like a lot of fun things you can do with playing around with the pixelated graphics. There's a game that came out recently on Steam. I think it was an iOS game called Punch Club, where this is a pixelated
Punch Club.
Yeah. It's a pixel art game of kind of like a simulator, like a fighting simulator.
Okay.
Where you play a generic male protagonist, who's voiceless male protagonist. No, actually, no, he's not voiceless. He does speak in the game. Never mind. But throughout the game, there's a whole bunch of like callbacks to like late 80s, early 90s, like movies and cartoons. Like there's a guy named Casey who works at a pizza joint, and he wants you to bring pizzas to his friends. Well, the friends live in the sewer, and they're kind of green, and they wear bandanas and have colored masks on.
And they probably have some sort of name like not Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or
Yeah,
something.
I mean they're all generic names like Bill, Steve, and things like that. But I mean, it's definitely like a tongue-in-cheek of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Your trainer is called Mick, who definitely is the not trainer from Rocky. There's a whole bunch of movie posters of like the Terminator or the Jean-Claude Van Damme's like bad 80s action movies. A lot of the bad guys you fight are like tongue-in-cheek names of villains. For example, one of the ones you fight is called like Admiral Lyle, like is a tongue-in-cheek name of Guile from Street Fighter.
That kind of reminds me very much of a game that I have. It was one of the first games I bought on Steam, and it's called Saturday Morning RPG.
Okay.
In which it's again, old style graphics, but it's set up in an episodic format like you're watching an 80s Saturday morning cartoon. So you have power-ups that are very noticeable callbacks to Saturday morning cartoons, hence the title of the game. So one of your power-ups is like a Care Bear rainbow.
Yeah.
Another power-up is a tractor trailer, which is the callback from Transformers.
Mm-hmm. It's just like with the medium. There's a whole lot of tongue-in-cheek, just nostalgia, like humor that can be associated with them too. And just being like, how stupid were we back in the late 80s and early 90s for thinking these things are cool or what have you. But you're still amused by it because of the fact that it's meant to be like a lighthearted poke at your childhood, but it's not meant to be meant to, in an offensive, derogatory manner.
No, it's that same sort of lighthearted humor, that sort of parody, making fun of yourself that you find in like Paper Mario, for example.
Yeah.
So things like that, and yet here we are, all in our 30s, playing these games that are clearly inspired by the old classics. I mean, we've got one coming out this year in the form of not Mega Man.
Yeah, Mighty Number 9. And there's a lot of other indie games that are coming out too that I may not be aware of, but I'm sure they exist.
There's a couple of other ones that are definitely big on the nostalgia factor for me. Oregon Trail,
mm-hmm.
which is a parody of Oregon Trail, from the good old Apple II days.
Yeah.
Same thing with what the hell was it called? I have it on my Steam library because another friend of mine, Nick, showed me this game, and I just had to buy it. Oh yes, it's another spin-off of Oregon Trail called Super Amazing Wagon Adventure. And it becomes hilarious. So the nostalgia thing is there, and I'm glad that we have this sort of resurgence because a lot of these games are finding pretty good audiences.
Yeah.
Even gamers younger than us who may have never seen these games, who may have started video gaming, maybe in the days of the N64 or the PlayStation, looking at these, going, what the hell were these? And finding that they really, really enjoy them very much.
Mm-hmm.
Which is good, because eventually, when I have kids, I'm starting my kid on the original Super Mario Brothers. You're gonna suffer like I did.
I don't know if I'd be that cruel to my kids, but I would probably be like, here's the games that I played, and the reason why they hold up is not because of the graphics, but because of the stories related to them and the character emotions and the character development that occurs throughout the game is, generally speaking, better than most of the more modern day games that have come out so far.
Well, I'll give you a big one. Final Fantasy IV.
Yeah.
Or Final Fantasy VI. You have the whole opera sequence. You'd think that in today's style of games with the realistic graphics, you think that 20 years ago we were getting all of the feels from
all la 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 with like literal chiptunes when 10 years ago or 15 years ago when like Final Fantasy music was starting to be played in freaking symphony halls, that there's actual like opera music being played and have actual people playing the roles of the characters on that play.
Here we are with a Super Nintendo game, and here we are reduced to floods of tears.
It's just really, and that's part of the reason, I guess, why I'm really disappointed with how modern day gaming has progressed, is because there's been such a focus on the graphics and how games look and things like that. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with having your game look good, look pretty, and run good.
No, not definitely.
But when you focus so much effort on that and leave your storytelling, your character development, your music to the wayside, you just don't get the same emotional investment from gamers that you would have gotten from them back then. Because of all that, because of how back then you were limited in how much memory you had available to you. Like, you literally had to be crunching little bits of data, not bytes, bits of data, to get the last words in, to make sure that the pixels weren't taking up enough memory so that you could still manufacture your cartridge to the normal specifications that the consoles could run.
Or if you were Satoru Iwata managing to fit a whole nother Pokemon continent.
Yeah. Like, the whole fact that for Pokemon specifically, the fact that he got literally 2 games, two full maps worth, with some occlusions, mainly Diglett Tunnel, but like the fact that he got 2 entire continents onto maybe a megabyte of data, not like megabits, like a byte, for the music, the gameplay data, the story, the Pokemon like location system, like their stats and having them roll their encounter tables and all that stuff. The fact that he's able to compress that onto literally a cartridge that fits in the palm of your hand and plays on, well, it was a Game Boy Advance, it was a Game Boy Color, so I guess it would have been a megabyte, maybe 5 megabytes, but still.
Still, the feat's impressive, and here we are, all of you listening out there, just listening to two male gamers, talk about feelings, but that's just the thing, and we've mentioned it on downloadable content before, that for me personally, I get fully immersed into a video game. For me, it's an experience. It's not necessarily something I just pop in, play to kill some time, and get on with my day. I mean, I do that on occasion, but when I am typically playing a platformer, or especially an RPG, I'm in. I am sucked right in, and if you've got, and this has always been the case with me, graphics do not take the priority. It's the story, it's the gameplay elements, it's the music. That is what matters to me, and there may be times that, yes, I'll just pop in a game just to kill some time, but if I'm playing an RPG, I just get right into it, or even a platformer. We're reaching a point where platforming games are, just as immersive and as good with their storytelling than, an RPG. So if you can get that sort of emotional experience from an 8 or 16-bit style game, then you don't need the shiny, realistic 3D graphics. If you as a developer can get your point across with the story and good gameplay elements, then so be it.
I mean, there's another thing you can look at too. Is like maybe they can think of it as a challenge of being like, if you can convey your point across with 3D graphics, cool, fine, whatever. But then think about how you're going to convey that across with. What if you're trying to design this back in 1992 and you're going to be like a launch title for the SNES in America? And try and design your game and focus on your storytelling and character development with that limited mindset. And being like, you only have so much data to play with in terms of like your word selection and things like that, that maybe this could be a way for you to carry it over into the modern day gaming, where you can have your fantastic graphics, but you can still convey that emotion with proper dialogue and proper audio cues and background songs.
I mean, I have the entire Shovel Knight soundtrack on my iPod because, yes, I'm a nerd like that. But a lot of that soundtrack I can listen to without having to play the game because it's such a good soundtrack and it fits that game so well.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of games, a lot of the indie games, generally speaking, have very good soundtracks because they know and can take advantage of the fact that they're like the chip tunes, and that there's a lot more they can do with chip tunes now than they could do back then.
Also, that, and because the games in that particular art style were, and this was one of the reasons for with the AAA developers as well, because those types of games were so hard, they had to come up with music that would be memorable.
Yeah.
Whereas,
like imagine trying to play like a Mega Man game with like a shitty soundtrack in the background as you're dying over and over to the Guts Man or Ice Man or what have you. Like you'd be pissed and probably would have broken more controllers than you did.
Like on Mega Man, like some of the more memorable themes for me, like Fireman's stage, Dr. Wily's stage, for example.
Yeah.
So, and with those games, you need that memorable tune because, again, the difficulty of those games, you might not get very far. It's probably the biggest reason why we all recognize the Mario theme song so much.
Yeah.
You talk to any gamer and and it's just, it's iconic.
Yeah. There's little YouTube montages where people are singing the Mario theme song, and it's just like interspliced amongst like 10, 20, 30, 50, 100, 200 people that was like one of the Nintendo press conferences was literally just basically a YouTube video of a bunch of fans singing the Mario theme song.
There is somebody on YouTube that I occasionally listen to. His name is Smooth McGroove.
Is this the acapella?
Yes.
Singer that does like all the battle songs in acapella, and it's not just.
It's like 8-part harmony, and
yeah, and like he intersplices it with him doing all like the highs and the lows in time with how the music would be.
And his cat.
Yes, his cat too.
His black cat. He's been asked if to do newer music, and And his response is that he finds the music from the older games much more nostalgia and much more memorable than newer games, because now every game has, not every game, but
a lot of AAA games have your orchestras and your award-winning composers writing them. It's not like you can have BioWare composing your game.
It's not like you have Koji. You don't have somebody like Koji Kondo sitting at a chipset, or Nobuo Uematsu trying to write this great music for Final Fantasy VII, but have to have it sound like a MIDI file coming out of your PS1. So, that's, and I totally understand that. And I tend to agree. I mean, you still have games that have very, newer games with pretty great music. Xenoblade, I thought, had very good music.
I mean, there are modern AAA games that have it. Generally speaking, the Mass Effect series has had pretty good music, I feel.
Absolutely.
Dragon Age, not so much, unfortunately, which really kind of disappoints me, because I think a fantasy setting's music is going to be better than most sci-fi or modern day music, just because of the magic, and I mean that in the literal sense, that the game has.
Metal Gear Solid's
got pretty good music.
Metal Gear Solid, so, I mean, it does exist, but the chip tunes and the MIDI files, again, and I think it's an age thing. I mean, we started gaming on the NES, so we're more familiar with that. That's our bread and butter.
Yeah, I mean, the opera scene in Final Fantasy VI is pretty good as a chiptune, and it's gorgeous when you hear it performed with actual live instruments by an actual freaking orchestra.
I will say so, because when I went to see Video Game Orchestra, Final Fantasy Distant Worlds in Boston, they did the opera from Final Fantasy VI, and I was like, holy shit! And you go from MIDI file, trying to sound like
an actual opera singer doing that music, with an actual orchestra doing the violins and the cellos.
The final boss theme, Dancing Mad, played on an actual organ in Symphony Hall in Boston, and it's just whoa. But when you play the game, it still, to me, has that emotional punch.
Yeah, because of the wonder of the chip tunes is that this is people trying to synthesize and convey the emotions and depth of of real life instruments, and using only how many hertz and how many frequencies are available on a chip tune.
I have no idea.
I mean, in a very limited range of sounds that you can perform on a chip tune, compared to the full width and subtleties that you could have because of physics. And if you can simulate that as well as you can convey that emotion.
Yeah. So it's yeah. I can't really add to that, because I think you've pretty much nailed it there. So, alrighty, and I think it's on that particular note that we are going to close out the first half. On the second half, we're going to talk about whether this retro revival is good for the industry or not. We'll bat around some ideas with that thread, but in the meantime, we'll cut out. You'll have some music, as is the usual custom here on Downloadable Content. In any event, you are listening to episode 1 of season 6 of Downloadable Content, talking about Pixel Glory. We'll be back. Welcome back to our season premiere. Season 6 of Downloadable Content. Ron and I are still here. Haven't gone away. We've pulled ourselves away from our NESs and our Super Nintendos just so we could be back amongst you.
Because it's not like because you like your company or nothing.
Don't worry, we make no money from this. We do it for fun. We do it for love. So yes, on this second half, we are going to talk about the effect that this sort of retro revival is having on the industry, whether it's good or bad, and we'll bandy around a few ideas for that. So I am going to dive right in. This is an opinion that is shared by a few of my gamer friends. I don't particularly agree with it, but some of my friends see this sort of retro revival of games as a bad thing for the industry because they feel that by going back into the nostalgia pool with these types of games, it's stifling creativity and growth in the industry proper. Which, okay, that's, to me, like I said, I don't agree with that opinion because to me, the AAA developers, they keep shoveling out sequels and sequels and sequels that, to me, also don't bother advancing the medium. We don't see a whole lot of new IPs coming out from the big guys these days.
And I think part of the reason why we don't see new IPs has been mentioned before, but for those who are listening for the first time, this is just my opinion, so take that for what you will. The reason why we don't see too many IPs is because there's so little, there's such a high risk on whether or not they get picked up that if they succeed, cool. If they don't, well, your studio may just straight up fold right then and there because you can't even pay off your investors. And so we see a whole bunch of reboots and remakes and HD reimaginings of your Resident Evils and your Tomb Raiders and whatnot because no one wants to take the risk on a new IP.
And that is basically my argument to anyone who says that these retro games are stifling creativity and it's not advancing the medium. To which I say, all right, well then.
Okay, to that I will say, what new IPs have come out in the past 5 years that are good and have had produced worthwhile sequels? Bioshock and Mass Effect. And I could see an argument for Dragon's Age, but I'm not 100% sure on that. And what do all those three games have in common?
Just before you elaborate on that point, let me just let you know that the first Bioshock game came out almost 9 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just kind of to kind of prove my point. So wait, they're not by BioWare. 2 of the 3 are by BioWare. That was my point. Whoopsies.
Yeah, Bioshock is irrational.
Bioshock's Irrational Games, and
Dragon Age and Mass Effect are both BioWare.
Yeah, like Dragon Age and Mass Effect are BioWare. Irrational Games did Bioshock, but Ken Levine was the one who helped create all those games, and he was the driving force of that company before they folded in 2013.
Yep.
And he was one that definitely focused a lot on the story and having like reasonable characters and things like that. I guess there is one that they have all in common is that these are games that all have, generally speaking, believable characters in in this setting that they are presented in. BioShock has crazy Andrew Ryan, but he's an interesting character in and of himself.
Well, BioShock was, it changed my opinion on first-person shooters.
Yeah.
I had thought that you couldn't. I found no entertainment value in a first-person shooter, and then somebody came, and then BioShock
and then came along and said, "Hey, would you kindly listen to our game and hear our story?"
I see what you did there.
But
nicely done, sneaking that in there.
Yeah, but BioWare's always focus a lot on story, and part of that's just due to their history of like Neverwinter Nights and Baldur's Gate and things like that. They have a heavy Western RPG background, but they conveyed that into a pretty successful action RPGs and sci-fi shooter RPGs with Mass Effects and Dragon Age.
Right. I mean, we have some other new IPs that have come out in the last few years that, The Last of Us.
Yeah.
For example.
Yeah. And
Titanfall, Destiny.
Titanfall, not so much. Destiny, I guess, eventually I got there. It took a while for Destiny to get there.
Watch Dogs.
Yeah. Watch Dogs wasn't even that good either. It was okay. It was basically hacker GTA with a slightly more serious plot.
Fair enough. I've never played Watch Dogs.
I played enough of it to realize what was going to happen. It was like, yeah, this is a slightly... It's not the crazy being someone to death with a giant dildo, but it's being someone to death with a crowbar instead, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
All right. I mean, and that's kind of the point, is that, definitely since the recession, video game companies have been playing it close to the vest. They have not really... New IPs are few and far between. So I find I haven't purchased, a full-on $60 game in years.
The last $60 game I purchased, or was it $50? I think the last $60 game I purchased was Xenoblade Chronicles for the Wii U, or for the Wii.
Good game.
Yeah, and probably the last new IP. No, I mean it's not a new IP. It's all part underneath the Xeno umbrella.
And that's the point, that when somebody says that the retro games are stifling growth and creativity, that's my response, is that, well, then if that's the case, what do you call the AAA developers that continue to to throw out stuff like Call of Duty and Call of Duty every year, or we're on Halo 5 now.
We finished up Halo 5, so we got Halo 6 soon-ish.
Capcom is beating Resident Evil to death.
Eventually there's going to be a new Mass Effect, but that's still probably a year or two down the line. There's always the MMO market, but that's always such hit or miss, too.
It's they say that the retro revival stifles this, and it's like, okay, well, what then? Why are we getting all of these reboots, reimagined?
They're playing on our nostalgia because the companies realize that we're willing to spend money to scratch our nostalgia itch.
There's a couple of news articles that I've read that basically describes what you've said there, and there was one from the website The Atlantic, or it's a magazine, and it's basically saying that nostalgia is ruining video games, that developers realize this, and so since there's money to be made in nostalgia, why spend the money making a new IP when you can just buy, the next Elder Scrolls or the next Fallout or Final Fantasy or Call of Duty or what have you?
Yeah.
There's no incentive to risk on a new IP when you have, the average gamer is in their 30s and they go, well, we can make money off of their memories.
And it's just like, it's not like the gamer doesn't want to play a new IP. Since most of the IPs that have come out are kind of shit because you don't focus on the storytelling.
Or the gameplay or anything like that. I mean, it's again, with these consoles, our current consoles, the graphics are paramount.
Yeah. And it's just like, we don't care about the graphics so much as we care about gameplay and a solid story.
I mean, obviously that's not entirely true for every gamer out there. I mean, there are many gamers who do enjoy Call of Duty and things, games like that. They enjoy throwing down money every single year.
Yeah. But I feel like for games that come out on a yearly basis, your Call of Duties and your Battlefields and whatnot, they're plopping $60 down not for the story of the game, because that's rather laughable at best, but they're plopping $60 down for the multiplayer, for playing with their friends and having a lot of like really close clutch moments of Twitch gameplay, because there's an element of skill and competitiveness involved in that, which they can't get as easily in other parts of the life, whether it means of like they don't play sports or what have you.
I mean, you also have gamers who are getting smarter with their money. There's a lot of them that realize that with each successive sequel, there's less incentive to drop full price on that.
Yeah.
When, if you want your nostalgia fix, you can go on Steam and get a good experience for far cheaper.
Yeah, or there's various programs out there that let you play your old SNES or NES games on your computer, and you'll take the slight hit in gameplay ability unless you spend $30 or so on a gamepad for your computer. And in that case, then you just basically simulate your game play from your old console on your computer.
The problem with that is that we keep shoving out all of these sequels and whatnot. Eventually it's going to reach a point where I think that we're going to have a generation of gamers who for whom these franchises have never existed, and it might force developers to start taking risk again, because they can't always bank on the nostalgia.
Yeah, I mean, they've kind of exhausted their supply of nostalgia games. I mean, we're getting a Final Fantasy VII HD remake because of the fact that Square doesn't have I don't want to say they don't have the money, but they've already remade Final Fantasy 1, Final Fantasy 2
umpteen times.
Yeah, 1, 2, 4 umpteen times. They don't seem to want to touch 5 or 6 for some reason. I don't know why, but they can't remake 1 through 4 anymore. 7 through 10, 7 they're doing an HD remake of. 8 they kind of want everyone to forget about. I think they want to leave 9 alone as long as they can. They did an HD remake and re-release of Final Fantasy X. I don't think they're going to do one for 13, and 12's too recent, and because it's on a PS2 as well. I don't think they're going to try and do re-releases of those either.
I mean, Square has already come out and basically said that they're going to be shifting their focus toward re-releasing their back catalog.
Yeah, and the there's not much of their back catalog left for them to re-release. Hell, they remade Kingdom Hearts 3 or 4 times.
No, it's like, come on, let's just release Kingdom Hearts 3 already. But that's a whole different rant. A rant that you may have heard me go on last season.
Yeah.
But I won't repeat that rant. You go digging through season 5, you'll find it.
I think it was like in the mid-teens that you go on that rant.
Whatever. Which goes back to, okay, if the AAA developers are not taking any risk and yet still expecting gamers to throw down $60 for each new sequel without doing much to improve on that franchise,
yeah,
then fine. If I want that nostalgia fix, I would much rather plunk down $10 to $20 on Steam from an indie developer to get that same sort of nostalgia than 60.
Yeah, because even though the game may not be as long, you're still spending $10 to $20 on a 10, not even 10, probably 5-10 hour game. Whereas you could plop $60 down for a Call of Duty game and get maybe 10 hours of story, and it would be kind of crappy story, and then you're kind of left to fend it for yourself and do the multiplayer. But if you don't even like the multiplayer for whatever reason, then you're just kind of SOL.
It's, that's my problem, and I think that there's a ton of creativity on Steam on the part of indie developers. I mean, we talked in the first half about all the different creative ways that developers are coming up with to evolve the 8 or 16-bit game.
Mm-hmm.
So I still get far more enjoyment out of that than a game like Resident Evil 6, for example. Another of my favorite punching bags.
Yeah.
Where, Capcom expected you to plunk down $60 for a game that was basically this far away from being an FPS.
Yeah. There's issues with... There's a lot of these issues that we have with game studios, too, appear to be the Japanese ones. And I don't really know why, to be completely honest. I mean, we're pissed off it's... Okay, so we're pissed off at Square because they don't want to make a new IP and take risks and make new studios. We're pissed off at Capcom because they're screwing up Resident Evil and doing 5 billion remakes and re-releases and screwing over their long-standing successful creators and developers and things like that. Konami just got rid of what's his face?
Kojima.
Hideo Kojima, and they said that they're already kind of looking to get out of console games in general and just focus on mobile games and pachinko machines, which are Japanese only by and large. There's a lot of things I see, just from general fan perspective, there's a lot of stuff that looks to be going wrong in the Japanese gaming market, and I don't know why. Whether it's just lack of faith from game developers over there, or lack of consumer faith, or the Japanese developers maybe just have gotten left behind by the Western gaming studio houses of Ubisoft and your BioWares and what have you.
I think there's something to that. I mean, for example, the JRPG is not as successful or as popular as it was, at least in this country. We get bored way too easily.
Yes. I also feel like there's a bit of a disconnect with JRPGs because of all the tropes and the stereotypes that are used in the JRPGs. There's been no innovation. There's been very little character growth or character depth in a lot of the characters that we've seen. There's no sense of creativity or innovation in the characters themselves. They're all just kind of like take general protagonist male backstory A and splash it on be shown in anime style number 15, and there's your next male protagonist for the Tales game.
For the 9 billionth Tales game, yeah.
Yeah. And it's just like, why are you guys not innovating? You obviously have pretty competent, like, graphics. Like, you have Tales of Xillia was one that I was playing, I think.
I think that's the most recent one.
Yeah, I was playing it, and, like, the gameplay's pretty solid. The graphics are, like, the anime style, but so it's relatively simple, but it's still pretty solid gameplay. But the story and the characters are all just kind of like, like they make me want to vomit because of how tropey they are. And it's just like, why can you not have a more believable story or more believable characters, and not just be, I'm the male protagonist, everything's going to succeed for me because I will it to be.
I think that's that. You mentioned a disconnect. I mean, I know they're very, very tradition. I mean, that's a large part of their culture.
Yeah, that's a large part of the culture. It's a lot of tradition based. There's nothing wrong with having tradition, but
after 25, 30 years,
after 30, 40 years of literal tradition, like, why are you not willing to innovate? Like, there's got to be like some sort of reason behind it. Is it just straight up fear from the developer? Is it just that they have no new ideas? Is it just no new mediums that they can think of? I mean,
and then of course,
I make fun of, like, I'm making fun of Ubisoft here because of how often they've had their Assassin's Creed games, but they're at least attempting to do things.
I've never played Assassin's Creed, so I can't speak for that. But I mean, then you have, the Western, quote unquote, Western developers. You know, BioWare, they're Canadian. Activision is American.
Mm-hmm.
Ubisoft is French.
Yeah.
Then you have a company like BioWare when you have an action RPG like Mass Effect, like Dragon Age, in which there are a variety of different plots and ways you can develop your character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's just like, not only do you have character creation and you have general ideas, and they also focus a lot on how you can affect the story. Sure, it's just rather simple dialogue windows, but there's still the option of choice, even if the choices can be relatively expected in terms of, like, the general good choice, your neutral choice, and then your renegade asshole choice.
Mm.
And it's just like, there's still that option in having that affect the story and how characters perceive you, and they react in a believable way. Whereas, like, Mass Effect, for example, I generally play as the Paragon, so everyone looks at me as, like, the greatest savior in the world, because I'm a person who is trying to do the right thing as the galaxy is literally being turned to shit, and I'm still trying to maintain morals and save as many people as I can. Whereas if I was playing a renegade, I am a general jackass and just looking to save as many people as I can, not because it's the right thing to do, but because it's, like, the only way I'm going to keep myself alive.
Which is then where I feel indie games and indie developers excel, because they aren't, well, you mentioned it at the very beginning, they don't have shareholders to impress, most of them.
Yeah.
So they are free to experiment.
Yeah.
They can break free from the tropes because they don't have people to impress.
Mm-hmm.
So you can get away with characters that are messed up or damaged, or something entirely non-tropey, for example.
Yeah.
Because it's a risk, and it may end up costing the company, but it's something different.
Mm-hmm.
It's something different. And I mean, and that's why I find myself spending a lot more time on my Steam library nowadays than I do my consoles.
Yeah.
So I don't think that the retro revival, as you call it, is bad for the industry. I think the opposite. I think that's where all the creativity is now. And I think that the AAA developers should take a look at some of these indie titles and draw inspiration from it, and go ahead and take that risk, because for a big, huge company, all right, they have shareholders to please and whatnot, but if it's the fans that provide the money.
Yeah, and they also feel like they could bring in, like, some fans, randomly select them and be like, hey, give us your opinion on our beta of the game. And be like, this is not a completed game. Here's some of the story that we're working on. What are things that you want to see in the story in terms of character progression, character growth, plot twists, things like that? And if they provide any worthwhile ideas, you put their names in the credit and be like, special thanks to blah, 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 Boz Smith. And then that's a way for them to show they care about their fans and also make the game better, which in turn should make them more money.
Some studios who manage to fund games through Kickstarter do something like that.
Yeah.
So, but then we get to a point of, how much fan involvement in the creation of a video game is good? Where do you draw the line, etc.?
Yeah. But again, I think that's a discussion that is worth having.
We've talked about a number of good, very good retro games, and how they are, improving upon the old formula, the old graphics. It's very interesting to note that whenever I go to PAX, I see a number of developers showing off their latest and greatest. When I got to the booth, Yacht Club Games, the guys who did Shovel Knight, we squeed for a little bit.
Yeah.
And then it was actually nice to talk about games that we were going back and now beating now that we're adults. Like, those old style games, they encourage me to go back to games that I've never finished, like Mega Man.
Yeah.
Or well, Mega Man's a bad example because I've only been recently playing the Mega Man franchise. Mega Man was one of those franchises that I completely missed as a child.
Yeah.
But it's encouraging me to go back and play games that, I can appreciate now because, I'm 30 years old. I have a little bit more restraint than 5-year-old me who would have thrown the controller. Now it's, if I'm 30 and if I throw the controller at my TV and break it, I go, well, fuck, now I actually have to pay for it. So,
yeah.
But then also, this is where emulators come into play as well because of that wonderful thing called save states.
Yeah. I also like how certain indie games are talking with the people that stream the games on Twitch, whether it's just casual people that do Let's Plays, or you've got your speedrunners, like, for example, the Yacht Club guys, generally speaking, donate money during a Awesome Games Done Quick and Summer Games Done Quick whenever they have a streamer on doing speedruns of Shovel Knight. And sometimes I remember they called in for Summer Games Done Quick 2015 or AGDQ 2015. They called in for one of the more recent ones and actually talked about how they've designed the game and then watched speedrunners go at it and then actually did updates to the game to make it better for people to speedrun. And it's just always having that developer community interaction is such a nice thing to see, because it shows that to me at least it shows that they care about the community that they developed and they want to keep those fans around.
That certainly makes a lot of sense. And they're just enjoyable. They're just enjoyable, period. I mean, yes, they can be frustrating, but I think going back to the first half, and we've been talking about nostalgia all along, and it's a big draw. It's a really big draw, and for many of us, we're not finding good memories and good experiences with current games. At least that's my opinion. You feel free to disagree with it if you like, internet. That's just my opinion. I haven't found very many good console experiences with current games, so I will go back to getting those good feelings and those good experiences by playing new indie games in the retro style. So
yeah, and I like playing the retro games. Part of that's through the nostalgia, but I also am someone that really likes a good story. And if you can come up with a good story that generally the indie games and retro style forces upon you, then I think you have the beginnings of a successful company.
Yeah. So, and it's just yeah. Oh, and the costs for many of these games. For many of these games, the cost is not prohibitive.
Yeah, that's also a nice little bonus.
And there are Steam sales and Humble Bundle sales very regularly. So why not? I'd much rather do that than spend $60 on a game that, $60 is a significant investment for a lot of us. That's, several hours of work, maybe more.
Yeah. I mean, if you're working in a minimum wage shop, $60 on that game is probably a day and a half's worth of actual work.
I've been seeing things that say that the median age, the average age of gamers currently is like 37 or something like that.
Yeah, it's a pretty high number.
Yeah, 37. That means, okay, if that's the median age, that means many of us are married or employed or starting a family, or a combination thereof. There are budgets. We no longer live we are no longer
it's trying to be. I think there's a paradigm shift happening in America where we're trying to move away from a disposable society.
I'd like to think that. I mean, so for many of us, we have budgets to keep, bills to pay, and so a $60 game can be. It's like, how much is that going to set me back? Whereas you can buy, multiple games for $60 from indie developers that are either, they're done in current graphics or retro style graphics, and have a blast.
Yeah.
So that's just my 2 cents on the whole idea that retro style video games are stifling creativity. It's like, all right, if you can say that, but give us some good experiences and not, not risky sequels and cutouts, and then maybe we'll plunk down that money again.
Yeah.
So.
I also think they should show a little bit more in terms of gameplay and things like that with when they do trailers of games, and not just focus on cinematics.
That's a marketing decision, but
yeah, I know, but that's still something that I feel like developers could at least focus on, being like, have there be more dynamic, customizable cutscenes and things like that, like you have with was it Life is Strange?
Another game that I have to play. I've heard very good things about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, we're weird. We're talking about video games. Like, we want them to give us all the feels. Yeah, we know.
Yeah. Whatever. I mean, we're not just beer chugging guys. If you think we're beer chugging guys, I think we kind of prove that we're not.
Although I do love hard cider, but that's a whole.
I was saying that's not a beer. That's not like your Budweisers or your Coors or what have you.
Yeah, Coors or Pabst or no. I love a good Angry Orchard, but that's all right. All right, I think we've pretty much beaten this horse to death. Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
For those who feel that this is just something like a trend that's going to go away or a fad, I don't think it is. I feel like this is going to be something that's going to be cemented mainly in the indie game and the in this, like, the small studio developers. We're going to see more focus on story and character development, and not so much on the graphics. And you'll probably still see your AAA games doing graphics and things like that, but it's something that I think that the game studio, the AAA studio, should be more aware of, and they could look to for inspiration, and maybe a slap on the forehead being like, oh right, we can write stories with our graphics. Duh!
Yeah, well, here's hoping anyway. So, alrighty, so if you have any thoughts on this episode or any other episode of Downloadable Content, please let us know. We welcome all feedback. Any kind. We don't bite. And you can do all of that on, again, our brand new website. Downloadable Content has a website. Hooray! It is www.dlcpodcast.com, and it is there where you can give us feedback, check out what we're up, future recordings. Go check out and listen to every single episode. Again, every episode has its own iTunes link, its own YouTube link, and a direct link for direct download or streaming. So you can do all of that there. You can also get to our social media pages from there. So yeah, let us know what you think. And if you want to be on an episode or give us an idea, feel free to do that as well. So begins year number 6 of Downloadable Content. We hope you stick around for the ride. We've got some good episodes planned for this year. Not the least of which is one that is going to be immensely popular, I feel. That's going to be the 20th anniversary of Pokemon.
Yep. What was the list of people coming on? Like you, me, and 5 other people?
I think it's I think it's you, me, and 6 others. We might beat Chrono Trigger.
I was going to say, we're going to have a Final Fantasy party, like a full Final Fantasy party going on to fight Sephiroth at this point.
Yeah, at this point, Kefka.
There was 12 people for Kefka. Let's be more realistic. We're probably fighting Sephiroth.
Yeah, alright, fair enough. So, there we have it. All it remains for me to do is to thank Ron for being the usual go-to.
The Robin to your Batman.
Basically, so, you know, he'll be on more episodes, don't worry.
I'm not wearing those tight boy trunks, though.
No, you don't have to. We're not paying you for that. You don't have to do that.
Okay.
You don't need to humiliate yourself.
Oh, I do that enough already.
You do that enough already. All right. I'm Brian. Have a good one, everybody.